chair by my side, the side of my mother. We read the passage my son William read, and it's one you'll hear my daughter Joanna read from, about our future hope in heaven. I had just read that with my mom. Sandy had done it many times with Dad. Being there when someone passes is a profoundly meaningful thing that can help us profoundly learn to live our own life better. Death is a fact of life. And it's culturally difficult in America, too, to face that. We shy away from it. We insulate ourselves from it. We sanitize ourselves from facing it. And especially a long, difficult, really terrible death. My father died of bone cancer, and we've discovered it's one of the most painful forms of cancer. And those who had to endure some of my emails, who would say they were 80% more verbose than they may be needed to have been, there are times the narcotic could not take the pain away. And that was 2 months ago. And I wouldn't want to see someone I hated go through what we saw my dad go through. And to see a loved one go through that. The only way to maintain our sanity was to receive grace and comfort from God. Now, he was the one suffering. But the agony of a loved one and being able not to do anything about it required us to really seek God in a way that I'll say it's not a surfacey, formal faith that can carry you through that. It's a visceral, God, I need your help faith. And he's there for that. Isn't he, Sandy? You needed it more than me. We wanted to share that we can learn something from that from the Psalms. If you go to the next, we're taking actually about 20 men through a process of, in our church here, with their wives, of life planning and spiritual development planning. And it's actually birthed out of the wisdom literature in the Old Testament. And a couple passages that crystallize the value of this are found here in the Psalm 39:3. Lord, make me to know my end and what is the extent of my days. Let me know how transient I am. And then again later in the Psalms, teach us to number our days that we may present to you a heart of wisdom. And some translations say, let me see the end of my days that I might acquire a heart of wisdom. Death and seeing death and embracing life and seeing that we have a limited amount of time, God has it planned for that to be a part of clarifying how those of us who remain can live our life wisely. Now, there's many more passages than we can cover here, but the idea is to soberly assess and plan and actually bring a strategic, long-term view into how do I want my spiritual health to be. We do it in professional settings. We do it in educational settings. Too few spiritual or religious settings have embraced this, but it used to be a part of solid, orthodox, biblical, both Jewish and Christian heritage. So it really is a time to soberly assess our lives. Seeing death, if we don't cower from it, lets us live our life and screen out things that just don't matter. I mean, coming close to death can do that. Many crisis events in life can do that. And part of the planning is that we are urging men and women to look back over their lives and punctuate it with key nodal events and look at God's hand. Many of the guys have shared that some of the most meaningful times were the most painful and, at the time, terrifying. Some decisions we make ourselves, some things just happen to us that we have no control over. But a sound biblical wisdom approach can see God's sovereignty in the middle of that. We saw that. My father, his faith accelerated as he cared for Mom. He really ended well. But he had some tough times, and he saw some tough things, and his life, we endured some tough times before his faith grew. there's a value for us now. Teenagers can see through the silly values that many teens chase after today when they're by the side of a grandparent, as my daughter Joanna was, when she died with 2 years ago. Or my son Walter, when we would happen to be with me on the trip my mother passed away. It's a clarifying thing for any age to grasp and see there's a wisdom in life that is beyond what may be portrayed in Twilight or something. So, Dad had a strange, he was in the Air Force, and we don't know why, but he was terrified to fly on planes during his civilian, after his retirement. And so he never flew on a plane. If we could move to the next slide. It was a real pain in the rear for us because Dad wouldn't fly, and there's times he just wanted to fly somewhere so we could get together as a family. He had to drive. And he gave me this lame excuse. Bill, well, he had some really close calls in the military. One was where their plane went into a dive over Vietnam or something. And he had to they had to restart the engine by putting it into a dive. And he said he and this guy from Texas looked at each other while all these young kids were trying to get to the escape hatch, and they just knew they're not going to make it. If this plane doesn't start, it's over. He thought it was over. And there's things like that for whatever reason he wouldn't fly. Well, this picture, go to the next one. This is Sandy in the airport. That's Dad's remains under that hat. And he's in this box right here. Actually, he's not, but the carbon that's left over from the cremation is there. He's on the plane right there, right? Dad, you flew. It's not that bad. Plus, there's a Sierra Club. I don't know why you did that. They have beautiful photos, but their theology and political stance is polar opposite to my father. And Dad, I'm sure now he sees it as a big joke, but that was terrible that you did that. Sierra Club. They're stopping the mining up in northern Minnesota, which would be cleaner today than it ever would be. So, go to the next shot. Now there's Caribou Coffee and MSP. Some guy let Sandy take a photo there. So, Dad flew. He didn't, whether he wanted to or not. And one thing he wanted to do was when he was in Vietnam, a guy had given him a copy of Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. And it turned out, and so anyway, that got him through Vietnam. There was a lot of guys, if you know history, some of the young men and old men, it was a tough place to be. And many men's morals and emotions went to the pot there. And it was really, a tough place. He read the Lord of the Rings, and it was an escape for him. And so, there were several times my dad, we thought he was going to die. I mean, he's never lived very healthy. Smoked, never exercised. I've got a letter up here that I wrote 11 years ago, the first time I thought he was really going to die. I took several of my kids down to Clinton. I wrote him a letter honoring him, and I wrote my mom a letter because I thought she'd feel bad that I didn't write her one. We had to use hers first. She died, she was health food, and she was into health food, and it's like, how Dad, you take a geriatric test, and like 80% of it is your heritage, even if you try to live healthy. It's the truth. So, Dad read The Hobbit, and he went to all the Lord of the Rings movies with us, and he thought they were phenomenal. They got him through. There's some unauthorized versions before the Tolkien Family Foundation actually authorized some printing. My dad had some of these given to him, and we still have them there. I mean, they're not illegal to have. They were illegal to sell back at the time. But historically, we've got